Welcome to the Wizard of Radical Self-Respect. My name's Jared Mello, and I'm the shepherd of Black Sheep. And I just made a post about this, but I'm reading a book right now called "And the Mountains Echoed" by Khaled Hosseini, and he has a phrase that I think that is the perfect synonym for the shepherd of black sheep. And he calls this woman a warden of the downtrodden flock. And I thought to myself, is there any more perfect synonym for the shepherd of black sheep than a warden of the downtrodden flock? I thought that was pretty cool. But in this stream, I want to go over, does autism need to be fixed? And this is something that there's a lot of debate about this because unfortunately, the issue of autism and then how it's caused and how it's treated, or if it even needs to be treated, there's a lot of controversy around it. And a lot of it's because it's become political, unfortunately. And when it's become political, then it distorts people's perceptions. And I think sometimes people, they're not necessarily doing what is best for autistic people. They are more just trying to affirm what they already believe. And maybe they have some confirmation bias in there too. But I'm someone that's on the spectrum. And so I'm going to talk about this from my perspective. Hello there, George. We had given you a demerit from yesterday for not being here, but you're right on time today. So we'll give you a +1 for that because this stream is less than 2 minutes old. But so I'm someone who's on the autistic spectrum. What did that mean for me? It meant for me that I had severe social anxiety and I just didn't know what it was because that was my normal at the time. And again, to me, this severe version of social anxiety, it's a little more severe than the average version I'm talking about because than the average person's anxiety because autism, they think, is a disorder of the GABA system in the brain. And GABA certainly has something to do with our levels of anxiety. And people that have a generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, or on the spectrum, their GABA system's probably a little bit out of whack. And alcohol, for example, is a GABA A agonist. Benzodiazepines, a GABA A agonist. Drugs like phenibut, a GABA B agonist. Drugs like, what's another one? GHB. I think that's another GABA B agonist, but they all work on the GABA system. And some of those things I really enjoyed because it would self-medicate my anxiety because I didn't know what my issue was. I grew up thinking this is just normal. This level of anxiety, not being able to look people in the eyes, not being able to be assertive, say no. I had a really low sense of self-worth too. And I'll tell you what, when you have severe anxiety, that does not help your confidence in any way. In fact, they contradict one another because can you truly be confident and have severe anxiety at the same time? I tend not to think so. Hey there, Ellie. How are you? I don't think you can. I think they certainly conflict, and I wouldn't be able to be as confident as I am today if I didn't have a sizable supplement routine to help me speak as clearly as I do. But back to when I was a kid, that was just my normal. And then I used to get picked on a lot by other kids starting in middle school and then into early high school because I was never able to stand up for myself. I just didn't have that level of assertiveness. I didn't have that ability to say, go screw yourself, like F you. I just never did that. And if you don't do that, and then you just give them this uncomfortable reaction, a lot of the narcissistic bullies, it just encourages them to continue. And I mean, now what I would say to someone in that spot, go to jujitsu, go to Muay Thai, learn some MMA. And if someone's not going to listen to you being assertive, use some martial arts against them. That's what I would say to a dude now. Phil Bradley, you're definitely live. You're right here with me. You're the co-host. Didn't you know that? I'm living the dream, Ellie, as always. But that's what I would say to someone who's being bullied. It's like bullies, they really only respect power and strength. That is it. But since I didn't have much of either at the time, I just continued to get bullied. And then I began to isolate myself because whenever I was around people, I would get bullied. And a lot of times, unfortunately for me in the hallways, if groups of people were laughing, Oftentimes, it was about me. People were making fun of me. And again, I just didn't have the ability at the time. I didn't know how to stand up for myself. And people would say, "Oh, you're just being paranoid. They're not all laughing at you." But for me, it was true. They truly were. And sometimes, even to this day, if groups of people are laughing, especially dudes, I can get that heart drop feeling and I can think, man, are they laughing at me? And again, some of this was because I was on the spectrum. Some of it was because I just didn't have a good sense of self worth, but they all compounded on one another. So when people say, well, before I go on to what people say, eventually what happened was I found drugs and alcohol and I would self medicate with them because that was the only time I felt confident. That was the only time I was able to feel comfortable in my own skin and to be assertive because my normal level of consciousness as someone who was autistic, and my version was probably Asperger's. And I think a lot of people that had Asperger's, even though it's not called that anymore, I think they could relate to it. But it was just a severe, uncomfortable feeling in my own skin. I wanted to jump out of it. But when I drank some beers, all of a sudden, that wasn't true anymore. And the same thing with opiates. Whenever I had opiates, then it wasn't true anymore. And I was able to finally be comfortable and feel like I could just live. But my normal consciousness, I wanted to jump out of my own skin. Why? Because I didn't know what was wrong with me. And then things got worse and worse. I wound up going to drug and alcohol rehabs, but I was just quiet. When I wasn't on any substances or drinking, I was just quiet, super quiet. And so I was able to kind of slip through the cracks. Nobody thought I was a problem. But on the inside, I was still tortured. I just didn't articulate it. I didn't know how to express it. But the professionals, they never diagnosed me as anything. When I was in my early 20s, they put me on antipsychotics because I had done drugs as severe as heroin, for example, heroin, Suboxone, methadone, and they almost killed me, for lack of a better word. But when I would go to these outpatient facilities, inpatient facilities, no one knew. They didn't say anything was wrong with me, but they gave me some antipsychotics. They gave me some Seroquel. They gave me some Zyprexa. So they thought something was wrong. They thought something was wrong enough for me to be on those powerful antipsychotic drugs. And drugs like Zyprexa, they make you gain a lot of weight. And I would take it at nighttime, and you have to eat like 20 pounds of food before you go to bed. It's really hard to describe, but someone else who's been on it, maybe that or Seroquel, they will understand what I'm talking about. But if I tried not to eat, I would wind up eating my pillow in the middle of the night. It was not very good. But that's what they were doing. And it wasn't until had to stop all the drugs and drinking too to even get a handle on what was going on. So when people say autism doesn't need to be fixed, I agree to an extent, but that also doesn't mean we shouldn't be trying to improve their quality of life. So for me, what would improving my quality of life look like? Well, it would be addressing that GABA system. And I do take GABA, the supplement, but I also take many other supplements too, because I do believe in the gut brain connection. I think 80% of your serotonin is made in your gut. And I take a couple different probiotics as well as 5-HTP. And they all play a part. And so for me, that was a big part in improving myself. So when someone says autism doesn't need to be fixed, it's like, well, kind of, because how is it displaying itself in your life? Because depending on how it's displaying itself, if you can't communicate, if you can't look people in the eye, and you have such awkwardness in public that you can hardly even function, and when you feel that way, it's absolutely going to impact your sense of self-worth. It's absolutely going to impact your confidence. What do you do then? Well, again, and that's why I think it's not as simple as to say it doesn't need to be fixed. It's like, okay, if it's really going to hurt your quality of life, what do you do about it? And I think for me, before I found my supplement routine plus my mindset routine and spirituality, etc., I always say the ceiling of my potential was just lower. I just wasn't able to meet my maximum potential. But now that I have this supplement routine, I feel like the ceiling of my potential has raised. And if you can do that for yourself, Why wouldn't you want to do it? Is what I would think. Hello there, Angela. And and that's when people say autism doesn't need to be fixed. It's like, well, do you want your ceiling of potential to be lower? Or would you want to be able to meet your maximum capacity? Would you want to be able to make the most out of this life? And if that's the case, maybe for some people, you do need some sort of supplement routine. Maybe for some people, you would benefit from some kind of medication or even antidepressant or something, because why wouldn't you? Because again, not everyone has the version of an autism that is severe anxiety. Only some people do. I've seen others that they don't seem to have it as bad. But for the people that have it is very uncomfortable. It is very painful. And to me, honestly, it almost killed me because I was self medicating so much with drugs and alcohol. And hey, it made me who I am today. So I'm not resentful about it. And it's easy for me to not be resentful because I found a supplement routine. And don't get it twisted. It's an extensive supplement routine. It's not just one small quick fix. For drastic problems, you need drastic solutions. I can't stress that enough. And if anyone were to see my routine, they might just think I'm absolutely crazy. And maybe they're not wrong. And maybe someone would say, well, you shouldn't have done all that. And I say, you know what? I couldn't live with myself knowing I could have achieved more. And so I think what I'm doing now, I'm able to meet my maximum potential. And for me, I think that's amazing. And so I think that's what we should be doing for anyone with autism, honestly. Like, why not? Why not try to help them to reach their maximum potential? That's my thoughts. And then in terms of the cause, it's like, okay, I think it's mostly genetic. But then now the political part is anyone thinking there could even possibly be an environmental factor. And it's interesting to me because with narcissism, people would say, oh, it's environmental. It's from childhood trauma. That's what creates narcissism. Whether you're neglected or put on the pedestal and idolized, that's what creates NPD. And some people were very adverse to the genetic component of NPD. And then it's flipped when it comes to autism. When it comes to autism, it's the opposite. No, all genetics, no environment. And as someone who's on the spectrum, like I said, I think it is mostly genetic. But does that mean there's zero environmental factors? I mean, I don't think so. I think I would not be surprised one bit if there's environmental things that contribute. Now, what are they? People are very adverse to hearing it's anything to do with vaccines. And I've heard studies that say there's none, but I'm not ruling it out completely when it comes to vaccines. And now RFK is talking about acetaminophen. Acetaminophen is not very good for you. Is it associated with autism? I've seen what the heck is it called? Something Johns Hopkins study where there says there might be a weak correlation. And that wouldn't surprise me either, honestly. I don't necessarily think it's a major cause, but perhaps for some people, it can absolutely contribute. But what else? What about all these plastics in our food? That wouldn't surprise me. There's so many things that are different in our life now over the last 100 years that just weren't present before. But there has always been autism. I do think that too. I think there has always been autism. People just didn't recognize it as such. But the question is the percentage much higher today? And then some people would attribute that to, well, it's because we're better at diagnosing it. It's like, well, kind of. I slipped through the cracks, like I said. No one knew with me. I figured it out myself. And people would tell me too. People on YouTube, when I was talking, they would say, have you ever looked into this? Because I think this is you. So when people see me blinking a lot, that could definitely be part of it as well. Because I think it's kind of a way to stim in a way to calm yourself down, the excessive blinking. But sometimes people will call me out for that. But again, maybe Roundup in the soil. I watched an after school video about that before, and it was pretty cool. But they talk about when the soil is not healthy, then the food that grows out of that soil is not going to be healthy as it once was, and the nutrients aren't going to be there. And what downstream effects could that have? Any number of downstream effects, honestly. And then what about our cell phones? What about all this radiation that we have right in our hands, right by our heads? No one even talks about that. We might come to a point that they say scrolling on social media and having a phone in your hand 24/7 is just as bad as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. We don't know, but they might think that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, because they didn't think smoking was that bad in the 40s and 50s, into the 30s. But now looking back, they realize, oh, yeah, that stuff was awful. Stuff was terrible. But now hindsight's 2020. And then maybe 50 years from now, people look back at us today and say, can you believe how much social media time they had? Can you believe how much time they were on their phones? Because we know these consequences. They'll know the consequences that we don't know now. So it's always easy to say in retrospect. But the point of all that was, is there a higher percentage? That's a good question. And I don't necessarily think it's just because we're better at diagnosing it. And then the other thing would be, if so, what's causing it? And could there be an environmental factor in that? I don't rule it out. I'm not saying I know the answers. I'm just saying I'm not ruling it out. Because as Dr. Simon said, science questions. Science is skeptical. But what I see in the autism space is the exact opposite. They say no environmental cause, period. Vaccines, no. Acetaminophen, no. Plastics, no. Roundup in the soil, no. That's what you see. Blame Ma. Welcome to the chat there. My parents just thought I had ADHD, and I found out as an adult, an OCD. Yeah, I mean, that's a very common story now, honestly. I think AUDHD is a big one too. ADHD comorbid with autism, ADHD and OCD. They're versions of neurodivergence, right? And Angela, how are you this evening? Ellie, what's new in your world? She's sleepy, she says, and cleaning, doing her Cinderella routine. Angela says, did you have narcissistic siblings, Jared? Why do you call yourself the shepherd of the black sheep? No, most I had was a sibling that was maybe borderline-ish, but that was it. But I consider myself the shepherd of black sheep because I was a black sheep. And I've always just related to the people that were a little interesting, like off the beaten path. Maybe they struggled with an addiction. Maybe they struggled with mental health, anxiety, and depression. Because when you're on the autistic spectrum, you don't necessarily fit in with the mainstream. You don't fit in with the popular crowd. I would always fit in with the people that were a little bit different. And maybe one of the reasons they were different was their addiction. Maybe one of the reasons they were different was because of their mental health stuff. But whatever it was, I always felt more comfortable with that kind of crowd. And like I said, the warden of the downtrodden flock. And not all of them are downtrodden. I don't want to belittle them, but some of them definitely are. And I just always felt more comfortable with them. They were my people. It's like they said, Tyrion said in Game of Thrones, he's got a weak spot in his heart for cripples, bastards, and broken things. I get it. I totally get that because the popular crowd used to make fun of me a lot too. So that's another reason I shied away from them. I wasn't welcome and I was made fun of, so I stayed away. And I always have a kinship with the people that are also made fun of in a way, or people who get bullied and picked on. I always want to stand up for them. I always want to make sure, because nothing makes me more angry than when somebody is picking on the weak, the people that can't defend themselves. That makes me mad. And I can't stand to see that. So when I consider myself the shepherd of black sheep, it's because those are the people that I relate to the most. And I have a feeling those are the people that relate to me as well. And so I want to help those people. I want to empower them. And part of how I want to empower them is to share my stories so they can identify and relate if they do. And part of it is also helping people with a supplement routine, because I do think our mental health is 50% science, 50% spiritual. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the science is our neurotransmitters and our hormones. So our neurotransmitters are things like GABA, norepinephrine, dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine. They all help our mood. And then our hormones, testosterone, DHT, estrogen, etc. And there's more too, like prolactin's a hormone as well. But if those things are out of whack, you're not going to be feeling your best. You got to get your science down. So when they say, as I was talking with Christian, the chemical imbalance theory, I think there's some truth a little bit in the chemical imbalance theory, but it's not complete because it's only part of the puzzle. If it was the whole puzzle, all you would need is an SSRI and everything would be all better. If it was the whole puzzle, all you would need is an SNRI or an antipsychotic, and that was it. But instead, there's the other 50%, and that's your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, your friends, your relationships, your physical health. How well do you sleep? How's your diet? Are you surrounded by a bunch of jerks? Do you have a good career? Those are all things that make up your quote unquote spiritual health, in my opinion. And both of them are combined. They're both needed to be the best version of yourself. If I just had supplements without hitting the gym, getting proper sleep, doing my affirmations, and doing the other things for my emotional health, all of a sudden that supplement routine isn't going to do as good for me anymore. And another big thing is just eliminating bad habits. So if you have an addiction, you have a mental health issue, those are things you got to take care of first. So if you excessively drink, then you can't be surprised if you're not doing too well. If you smoke a pack of cigarettes a day and you're getting tired all the time, well, you can't be surprised when you're smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I'm a big fan of addition by subtraction. So subtract those bad habits and then replace them with something new. But what else is new in your world today, Angela? I want to blame C2O. Hashtag blame Ma C2O. Interesting. Did you come over from Instagram, by the way? I hope you did. But the autism topic is something I'm passionate about because it's a source of a lot of pain in my life. But again, I got lucky with it. There are some things that I found that I had no intention on finding, but they've really helped me. And they've really helped me live a better life. And I totally acknowledge there's a lot of luck in my story. And some people aren't open to it, though. I would try to help some people with it, but a lot of people aren't open to it. They think, nah, I'm just going to do what my doctor says. But yours truly, I'm a big fan of natural things. I'm a big fan of plant medicine. I'm not a big fan of prescription drugs. Ah, very good. Even better if YouTube suggested me, honestly, because sometimes YouTube doesn't like it if people come over from Instagram or Facebook because they don't get along. YouTube doesn't get along with Instagram or Facebook, by the way. But it's pretty cool that YouTube is suggesting this. And I find these live streams, they get recommended more than my longer form recorded videos, which is fine by me because I like being able to talk to people like this. I like being able to talk to the flock of black sheep. Right, George? And Angela, we can also go over that thing you were talking about with the Democrats and narcissism, etc. We can go over that too. And maybe I'll talk to Grace again in the future about some things. And I think, because there's an argument against what she was saying too. But again, I didn't want to grill her on it, but we'll see. And even Christian and I, we might talk about politics again moving forward because he's got some pretty interesting thoughts on politics. I think they're pretty interesting. He's got a lot of interesting thoughts and a lot of different things. Exactly. YouTube usually recommends crap. Very good. I'm glad you subbed. Tell a friend. You know what I see? I see a lot of AI crap get recommended to me on YouTube. And even my history genre, they're getting all these AI stuff that's just, they make outlandish history, which is interesting, but when it's an AI voice, it kind of just ruins it. Thank you, George. George knows what's up. This is a great channel. Angela says, I'm doing well, Jared. Thank you for asking. I had to deal with my narcissistic siblings today, but I kept my cool. Thank God this day is almost over. Maybe you could talk about your narcissistic siblings, Angela. We can give you some Give me some ideas for some content, perhaps. And that's the thing I don't go over very much. In your family, I don't know if you're comfortable answering, but like, did you have a narcissistic parent, narcissistic mother, narcissistic father, definitely narcissistic siblings? And if so, were you a golden child? Were you a black sheep? Were you a scapegoat, lost child, invisible child? I'll be curious to hear. But narcissistic siblings, there are a lot of triangulation, a lot of bullying, a lot of belittling, insulting, put downs. Not good. And they can act as flying monkeys for people. Not good. But back to the autism topic. I think when people say it doesn't need to be fixed, they're just hell bent on making it seem like there's nothing wrong with autism. And on its face, there's nothing wrong with being autistic. But that really all depends on what your symptoms of autism are as well. Because if your symptoms of autism are hurting your quality of life and they're lowering the ceiling of your potential, how good is that? And maybe you don't want to call that needing fixing, but perhaps you can call that needing improving your quality of life. So I think we should be for that. And hey, if they do find out there's an environmental like contributing factor, why not try to look for that too? Like, why not? Because if you could, and it's environmental, sure, there's still going to be the genetic version, but perhaps it'll be less severe without that environmental component. And perhaps people that are on the borderline, maybe they do a little bit better. I don't know. I just can't stand it when people are so close minded towards it. They'll say, why can't you be a little more open minded about this? But instead, they have a dead set belief. And one of my favorite political commentators is named Dan Carlin. He says, wisdom requires a flexible mind. And that is something I totally agree with. And speaking of wisdom requiring a flexible mind, I was having some debates today on the old iGizzle, and it was about people that think the Charlie Kirk thing was just a hoax. It was all fake. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes these people that they go hard in the paint on the conspiracies, right? I don't necessarily think it was fake. I think they've been lied to. I think they've been lied to about the kind of gun that was used, if you looked into it, or where the exit wound was and where the shot came from. I definitely think we're being lied to about that. But they're saying, nope, it was all a hologram. It was a hologram. There was no crime scene. It's all fake. Charlie Kirk's on some Barbados island right now. It's like, no, he is not. Like, this is where the conspiracy theorists go too far. They'll take some truth and then they take it to its extreme. And this is the other thing about conspiracy theorists. People don't get mad about this, probably. But I think there's an element of narcissism in some of them. They want to think they have special knowledge that no one else has. And they think two things simultaneously. They think, on one hand, the government is smart enough to pull off all these things. Say Charlie Kirk shooting's fake. They're smart enough to do that. But simultaneously, these people that believe that, they're smart enough to see through it, and the government wasn't smart enough to trick them. So the government's smart enough to do it, but not smart enough to trick them because these people are just so smart. I think there's an element of narcissism in there. They think, I got the special knowledge that other people don't have. It's a way to be a little bit special. If they want, it's a way to kind of get a validation for being a little bit different, we'll say. And again, I think when they go too far with it, then all of a sudden they ruin it for the conspiracies that are real. And I think there are conspiracies that are real. Look at the JFK shooting. There's highly likely, highly probable there was some tomfoolery there. Look at the Gulf of Tonkin. What's the Gulf of Tonkin? That was our excuse to get into the Vietnam War. And looking back at it now, it was forged. The whole thing was fake. So we got into the Vietnam War on false pretenses. And that's probably directly connected to the Kennedy shooting. George says, yeah, they think they carry the light of the world. A bunch of bullshitters. Yeah, I mean, and I agree. I was fighting with some people about it on Instagram today. They were calling me weird and cult-like because I truly don't have a side with it. I'm not a conservative, nor am I really progressive. I just want to get to the truth. So when I was debating this woman about it, she's like, it's so weird that you're defending the Kirks like this. So what are we talking about? I don't care about Charlie Kirk. I don't care about Erica Kirk. And I realized what they were using Charlie Kirk for. They were using him to recruit people to the conservative side while also being a little divisive at the same time. That was part of the goal. But I was questioning their beliefs and I was accused of being weird and culty and defending them. And I said, if your beliefs can't hold up to my scrutiny, then your beliefs are not very strong. Blame says, I feel like I'm listening to me. Aha! Good. Because that way, as the black sheep are here, hopefully we can get some people that see through some of this stuff. Because I am someone that I see the BS from both sides. I think there's a fair amount of BS from both sides. And that's why everyone can make me mad. Everyone who completely subscribes to a side, that makes me mad. And some people have said it's maybe being on the spectrum that you're able to see this. You're able to see both sides BS because you're on the spectrum, because you're a neurodivergent. And I had never thought of it that way. And maybe it's true. I'm not saying it definitely is, but I wouldn't be surprised. Someone said that to me today. They said, oh, yeah, I see it too because I'm autistic. And I said, hey, good. I didn't put two and two together like that, but maybe that is what it is. But I see both sides. And so when I talk to people on the right, I can sound like a Democrat. And then when I talk to people on the left, I can sound like a Republican. But at the end of the day, I can make everyone mad. That's one of my superpowers. But it's really just because I have a dead set idea of what I think is right, and it doesn't align with conservative or progressive politically. It's like, okay, what do I think? What's true? And that's not how most people see it. They don't see it that way. George says, anytime you bring up the truth or religion, they call it a cult. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. The cults make me mad. Groupthink makes me mad. Echo chambers make me mad. Gaslighting makes me mad. Gaslighting is when a group of people are basically flying monkeys for others and they'll say, yes, queen, even though they're saying something delusional. Angela says, my narcissistic sister is married to a narcissist and she can't live without my narcissistic mother. She is the golden child. I'm working on stop talking to my parents, but she is married to my mother. Oh no. So my narcissistic sister is married to a narcissist. So she married someone, yes, just like her mother. So often that's what happens, right? And it confuses people when it's a same-sex thing, right? It's your sister. And even though your mom was the narcissist, she probably craved your mother's love the most. And even though she was a golden child, the golden child doesn't have it perfect either. The golden child gets a lot of praise and admiration, but it's definitely conditional. That's the thing about the golden child. If the golden child acts out and stops giving that narcissistic parent narcissistic supply, stops being the ideal version that narcissistic parent wants them to be, then that golden child can get demoted. And then you can get demoted to scapegoat or black sheep if you're not careful. And that's what happened to me, honestly. I used to be a golden child, but then when I started acting out with drugs and alcohol in my high school years, I got demoted. I got demoted to scapegoat and black sheep. And a part of the reason I was demoted too is because I quit baseball and my dad's favorite thing was baseball. So that was a big no-no in their world. So demotions occur. The roles can change over time. They're not static. They're not fixed. Golden child isn't always the golden child sometimes. Scapegoat isn't always the scapegoat. Black sheep isn't always the black sheep. Now, of course, they can stay the same too, but it doesn't have to be that way. But back to the Charlie Kirk thing. So I was debating her on it, and she was like, no, there's no ambulance. Show me the hospital records of him in the hospital. And I said, you can't get the frickin' records because of HIPAA. You can't just call and get anyone's hospital records because you ask, unless you're part of law enforcement or some sort of medical team or part of the family maybe when they're dead. That's it. You can't get their records. but they use any little thing to perpetuate what they think. Angela says, my narcissistic sister is like my narcissistic mother, and they are always hanging out together. How can a man put up with that behavior? Well, Angela, I would not be. I would not be putting up with that at all. I would not like that one bit. Mostly also because in person, bigger groups for too long are not my favorite. And you could say also, well, Jared, what is this? But this is different. This is different. This doesn't deplete me as if you all were right in front of me in the same room. That would be a little different. That would probably drain me quicker. But when it's like this, there's that buffer. And the buffer doesn't make it so that this drains me. Being on camera can drain you a little bit. It's weird. It's hard to describe. But unless you're used to it, it's probably hard to describe it. But especially in the beginning, I was super awkward. But as time goes on, you get used to it. You get more comfortable with it. And then you can truly be yourself. And that's how you know you're in a good spot with it. If you can be yourself on camera, that's when you know you're confident and you have a good, you're secure in yourself. And I think I've gotten to that point, but there's always room to improve. Definitely room to improve. But why did I bring up that Charlie Kirk thing anyway? I think it's just an example of they were telling me I'm in a cult because I just wasn't agreeing with them or I was questioning them. And they were like, no, I want a group of like-minded people. And I was like, what do you mean by that? Do you mean you just want an echo chamber? Is that what you mean? You want people that are not going to question you? But to me, it's frustrating that people take it so far. Bear, welcome to the chat. We missed you yesterday. Probably the guy's mom had narcissistic. You're in your element and it shows. Good. That's what I'm going for, George. Angela says, would you like a woman who loves calling her mother every day? I could deal with a few minutes, perhaps. But if it's like an hour a day, every day, Well, you know the expression, daughter's a daughter's for life, but a son's a son until he takes a wife. So I think there's an element of daughters also are more family oriented for longer. But when there's a narcissistic mother in the mix, then that changes everything. All right. Are you, and what did you say, Angela? Are you no contact with your mom or no? I'm working on stop talking. Yeah. So you're not no contact yet. But it sounds like you're low contact or least amount of contact necessary. And the level of depth of your relationship with them probably isn't too deep. George, love when people are in their element. Absolutely. There's no better way. Hell no what, Angela? Ah. But I recommend going the old no contact route. But that's why they say it's the cult of the narcissistic family. They stay close knit sometimes for a while. But when I say close knit, that doesn't necessarily mean it's very intimate and connected. It just means they're enmeshed. It means they're enmeshed and too close for comfort. And it's more of a cult. Instead of individuals, instead of everyone being their own best version of themselves and autonomous, what they are is an enmeshed blob. They're an enmeshed blob of people that have groupthink, backstabbing, flying monkeys, and it's just hideous. Angela says, low contact with my parents, but I'm planning no contact. What does your father have to say for himself, Angela? Has he been in a trauma bond with your mother, I guess? Is he narcissistic too, or is he more of an enabler? Or is he more of a flying monkey? Gotta watch out for those dysfunctional family systems, I'll tell you. I would never allow my future husband to talk to my parents? Hell no. Oh, to talk to your parents. And don't worry, Angela. I don't think I'd want to talk to your parents. For the very most part. Like, I don't need to talk to anyone for the most part. And the fact, if anyone wanted me to and pushed me too hard, I would probably want to do the opposite. That's my thing. I hate being controlled, and so if someone tries to control me, it's not gonna go well. Yes, Ellie, it's an enmeshed blob. That's exactly what I call it. And I've seen them. I've seen many of these narcissistic family cults, the enmeshed blobs, and they're repulsive. They're absolutely repulsive. And that's where you'll see the dishonest harmony over honest conflict. My parent is an enabler flying monkey. Remember, I made the difference between an enabler and a flying monkey is flying monkey to me is more offensive. They'll commit abuse by proxy and they're more active in their harm. Enablers are more passive in nature. Still harmful, mind you, but more passive. Because an enabler is mostly what they're not doing. That's the problem. They're not speaking up. They're not standing up. That's the problem. Flying monkeys, what they're doing is also the problem. Because flying monkeys are always enablers, but enablers are not always flying monkeys. You don't want to be the enmeshed blob, Ellie. Certainly not. When you are an adult, you don't need your parents at all. Yeah, I agree with that. I think I'm gonna talk to my dad probably more than I talk to my mom. But I'm not one of the people that has like a best friend relationship with my parents. I'm not on bad terms with them, but I'm not someone that talks to them like every day, all day, like some people do. I see a lot of my clients, for example, there's guys, their narcissistic mother interferes with the whole thing. It's insane. And happens to some daughters too. They interfere. And I would not tolerate that for a second. If someone tried to really interfere with me, I'd run the other way and I'd move far away so they couldn't. Sometimes geographical boundaries are the best boundaries. Abuse by proxy is right, Ellie. Control backfires. Yes, because you know what they say, Bear. When you try to control someone, you might get external compliance, but internal defiance. So you see them agreeing on the outside, but on the inside, they're getting ready to rebel. And you see this a lot with the Catholic schoolgirl trope or Catholic school dude trope, but it's not really much of a Catholic school dude trope. It's usually this Catholic school girl, but they went to Catholic school their whole life and then they rebel and then they become like a porn star or something. I'm planning to tell the truth about my parents on my first dates. You know what, though, Angela? I don't know if I'd recommend that on a first date. I wouldn't recommend that because I don't necessarily think it's their business right away. I think maybe date 2 or 3, maybe date 3. But right away, like the first date's more for you and that other person. You want to see if you're going to get along with them, you're compatible. You save some of the more serious stuff to date 2 or 3, in my opinion. But again, I'm not saying that's the one right way. That's just how I would do it. Because, and and I've messed that up before too. I've shared too much on a first date before, and it only hurt me. I think people thought it was too much. George says, every Catholic girl I met is a raging rebel and ready to fight you. Yeah, see? That's the point. They felt controlled, they felt smothered, and what do? The first chance they get, they rebel. It's like the kids that were super controlled in high school. They had really strict parents. Then they go off to school for the first time and they taste their first breath of freedom. And then when they have their first breath of freedom, they act out and they just go off the deep end. That happens a lot. In the Amish community, that happens too. And then when they're together, they run. Yes, because then they'd be double trouble. Double trouble, these ladies sometimes, I'll tell you. Well, nowadays, there's so many different kinds of women out there. Like back in the day, there was more of a standard of, okay, most people are generally going to be like this. But nowadays, there is none of that. You don't know what you're going to get. There's so many different versions of people. There's religious people, there's spiritual people, there's yoga people, there's freaking just boozers, druggers, hippies, rockers, freaking IG models, influencers, political obsessed, vegan obsessed, climate change obsessed, martial arts, dancers, you name it. There's so many different versions, and there's so many different versions of morality now, too. I mean, some people have none, and then some people have a lot, and then there's a whole lot in between. So it's hard. You don't know what you're dealing with a lot of people. Angela says, if you are normal, healthy, and you protect your future partner, you can have a good marriage. Sure, I agree. But what's your definition of normal, Angela? That's the key. Bear says, I love my parents. I used to have problems with them. Healed now. LOL, yeah, extremes happen with heaven. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I've had similar things because when I was acting out, my parents were like the police, and I was trying to avoid getting caught by the police. Ellie says, you can share who you are with new people without oversharing. Yeah, I agree with that. There's heavy control, I meant. Catholic girls sound. Ah. I agree, Ellie. It's about the balance, right? You have the balance of sharing a little bit about yourself, having some fun, and the get to know you phase. And the best people, the people that have the best time in the get to know you phase, are the people that are the most comfortable in their own skin. If you can own who you are and you're you and you own it, then you don't have to pretend. There's no pretending, there's no mask really. You're just you. And whether someone likes you or not, you're good. You're good one way or the other. Angela says you need to be honest with people to find the right person. Oh, of course. Of course you do. You're not going to find the right person by lying. That's for sure. I think in the beginning, people put their best representative out there, the best foot forward. But you can do that without lying. Narcissists are very judgmental and contemptuous. Yes. Judge-opotamus is what I call them, George. They always got something to say. Charlie, welcome to the chat. Ellie says, yup, you are not on an interview. You are on a date. Correct. And, we've all been on some of those interview dates. As I was older, in my late 30s, some women would put me on those interview dates. They're not very fun. And granted, I understand why they were doing them. If they really want to have kids and they think time is running out, they don't want to waste any time. And I can understand that, but it still doesn't mean it was fun for me. And I wasn't in a place that it wasn't going to work because I just wasn't in that same place. I'm still building what I'm doing, and it's still taking a long time. Angela says you are normal and healthy when you can have healthy relationships and manage conflict. Okay. I can get with that definition. Although I don't necessarily like the word normal, but I like the rest of it. Normal seems a little seems boring almost. But maybe that says something about me. That I do things that are a little bit different, off the beaten path a little bit. They'll say, what do they say about the path? Like there's something you can follow the path, but that's not where the flowers grow. The flowers grow when you're off the beaten path. That's something I subscribe to a little bit. What do you think, Jolly? And in terms of this, Jolly, I know you're also on the spectrum, as you said. In terms of autism needing to be fixed, I think that's an incomplete thing to say. I think you can say it doesn't need to be fixed, but don't confuse that with not needing to improve. Don't confuse that with there's nothing that you could do to improve your quality of life. And again, in terms of the environmental factors, if they find one, like why wouldn't you try to avoid it if there is such a thing? I'm not saying there definitely is. I do think there's a majority genetic component. But if they do wind up finding some sort of environmental cause, why not try to eradicate it? Own it. It is lovely and a lot of fun. I agree. Yes, I am. Normal is when you don't have any personality disorders. Okay, I can get behind that definition, Angela. Hey, Matilda, waltzing Matilda, and hey, Bear. All we need next is Old Bear. What's a chat with only one bear? We have Bear, and then there should be Old Bear. Old Bear, she's on Instagram, and I put a story up. She better be coming on over here. Joy says, I once interviewed during a dinner date, and I said, I don't know. I just came for the free meal. And the lady next to my table died laughing. You came for the free meal, George? Someone paid for you? That is a thing. Some women do that too. Some women, they go out just to get these free meals. I've never really understood that because in my experience, if a woman doesn't like me, she doesn't even want to see me. She doesn't want to go out to dinner with me. And granted, I mean, and dating's expensive now. If you go out and do real dates, you'll spend $100 before you even blink. And then, God forbid, if there's some booze in there too, holy mackerel. It is not cheap. And it's because the money just doesn't go as far as it once used to. Money now is, whew, goodness gracious, great balls of fire. Did what work? That's the question. For George, you mean? I don't know. You have to ask George. George, did it work? And I think as a man in particular these days, you just better be in a good financial spot before you're looking for anything serious, because if you're not, it's going to be a struggle. And that's one of the things I was going to disagree with Charlie Kirk on. Charlie Kirk was saying, get married young and have kids you can't afford. And I was like, what? I think that's terrible advice. Because if anything, all it does is it gets you stuck so that you don't have as much mobility anymore. You're not able to meet your full potential. You're stuck taking care of a wife and kids or a husband and kids. Oof. An interview while I'm chewing is a no-go. I agree. LOL, yeah, exactly. Where is that old bear is right. Yes, we are, Angela. We are in a global recession. There might be a depression soon, too, by the way. Cuckoo advice. Not my advice, was it, Ellie? My dad told me to get married. Oh, yes, Charlie Kirk's advice, yes. Charlie Kirk's advice was cuckoo advice. I did not like that one bit. People who interview are very particular weird. Yes, I would agree. My dad told me to get married in my 40s. As a man, that's not bad. Gabriel, hello, welcome. Hi, Jared. Any commentary on autism and how it affects money management? In the beginning of this stream, I did do a lot on autism, but how it impacts money management? To me, that would depend. It depends on other factors because just because someone's autistic doesn't mean they're going to have the same personality and temperament. But someone who's autistic, I think they're also more likely to develop CPTSD because they're often more likely to be bullied, which can be a cause of CPTSD. They're also more likely to attract narcissistic partners, or narcissistic partners are going to prey on them, which makes it more likely they'll develop CPTSD. But autistic people generally like numbers. And I've seen many autistic people get into the accountant fields. So that's something I've seen them do. So that version is probably good with money management. But here's the thing. If an autistic person is really struggling with their mental health, they're struggling with their stability, Well, now their money management's going to go out the window too, more than likely. And then they're going to go off the beaten path. Angela says inflation and this bad economy are the enemies of love. I would agree with that. They also say love is the enemy of duty, as Aemon Targaryen told Jon Snow. Exactly. Yes, Charlie Kirk, not me. Hey, Gabriel. Hi, Jolly. Yes, Jared. You cannot start friendships with interviews. Yeah, it's just too forced. It's too forced, right? So back in the day, Gabriel, when I was much more emotionally unstable, I was out of control because I was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol. I had severe anxiety and then severe depression. And then the addiction made my behavior erratic. And I was all over the place. I was big into escapism. I was big into fantasy. And sometimes that would involve gambling. And gambling does not go hand in hand with money management, especially when you add mental health in the mix and emotional instability. No, not a good recipe. I'm in banking and fraud detection. I think my autism helps for sure. Oh, for sure. I could definitely see that. Angela says, finding a hot best friend is the most difficult thing in life. Yes, I agree with you. It's not easy, but the more okay you are with you, the better version of yourself you become. I believe the more likely you'll find someone like that. Yes, Gabriel, I did do 12 steps many moons ago, and I did develop a lot of self-awareness from doing them. I think I think everyone should do them, honestly. I think everyone could benefit from learning about themselves and their patterns and their character defects and their shortcomings. So, there were other issues I had with AA and NA down the line, but I'm definitely glad I did go when I did. I'm glad I went. I learned a lot. It was my first step into spirituality, and I don't regret that one bit. I could almost guarantee you I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't do those things. It got me down the self improvement path. What are your thoughts on that now? I did them for 12 years, but refused to ever go back. No, I just didn't like some of their mindsets. So saying you're always sick all the time, you need this. If you stop going to meetings, you're going to go straight to heroin and die. One is too many, a thousand's never enough. I just, I moved out of it. I moved out of it. And at the time, though, I moved out of it by taking this drug at the time many years ago. And that was the reason why I left. But, I had some rough times after that too. But then I stabled myself out. And now here I am. Were you a drug addict and a gambler when you were younger, Jared? Did you have problems with cocaine? I have done cocaine, but I don't think I necessarily had a problem with it. I did a lot of gambling, and I had done a lot of drugs before for sure. Me too. Also found a lot of magical thinking, a lot of fear mongering too, and cultish vibes. Yeah, I mean, there are certainly cultish elements to NA and AA, but in comparison to how dangerous active addiction is, I think it's a step in the right direction. So I think the cons of a 12-step program, AA and NA, is not as bad as the cons of dying. So you do what you got to do there for a minute. And sure, nothing's going to be a 100% perfect solution. And it did give me a little bit of an us versus them mentality. There's us, the addicts, alcoholics, and then there's everyone else. Then there's the normies. And it wasn't until I left that I've just become more with everyone. I'm just, I'm with everyone. And now maybe my tribe is more of like the influencers and creators. But back then it was us, the addicts. And that's an element of a cult. They cut you off from everyone else and they'll say, you who are like me, we're the same and we're not like everyone else. And that kind of gives you a little bit of a weird self-esteem boost in a way, can kind of make you feel special. And it makes the group more closely knit. It gets them closer together. But it gets them closer together to the detriment of everyone else. So you get closer together with your group, but then you get further apart from the rest of the world. Our lives, Jolly says, our lives are very similar. Our lives are very similar. My psychologist was surprised that I was not a drug addict or alcoholic. Yeah, I mean, if you were undiagnosed on the spectrum for a while, I could totally see why they would think that. Bear says, yeah, facing what you're running from will eventually free you. Yes, got to face those things head on. Gabriel says, many people are lifers. I now have a hard time with people in the rooms. If you had just left, I can see that happening in the beginning. That's how it was for me. I left over 10 years ago now. So I'm 40. I probably left when I was 28 or 29. And for the first couple of years there, it was weird because they were mad at me for leaving. I broke the cult in a way. I'm a different person now. But now, if I were to see them again now, I've accepted myself to the extent that I just wouldn't be bothered. I'd be like, yeah, hey, I'm cool with you. It's fine. They would be more likely to have a problem with me, I feel like. Yeah, I don't drink or do anything at all anymore. I mean, you could say my supplements or caffeine. Caffeine's a drug. So I'm not like perfectly clean when you think of it like that. But I'm doing. Angela's always trying to get me in trouble. Our lives, yes, like cancel culture. At AA, they need you hooked for their survival, I suppose. Well, it's a group thing. They want, like, if you go to AA and you can be a person that just drinks 2 to 3 beers, you'll break their brain because they'll think, no, one's too many, 1,000's never enough. You drink one, you're going to get drunk. So it's just that's the cultish mentality. And that is true for some people, though. Like it is. For some people, that really is true. But then you got to make sure you're honest with yourself. Because again, if you've gotten so bad that you need to go there, you should probably act as if that's true for a while for your own benefit. And then people do take a risk if they leave. If they leave and then maybe pick up a drink again, it's definitely a risk. Doesn't mean they're going to go straight back to their drug of choice, but it's definitely a risk. Jolly says coffee and cigarettes, caviar and cigarettes, they're best in etiquette, are my vices. I can cuss like a sailor as well. Cigarettes are bad ones, Jolly. I got some potions for you if you want. Gabriel says, yes, the attitude is that if you leave, you're in denial and in danger. The woman who wrote Eat, Pray, Love is doing interviews now talking about her time in SLAA, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and now she left and then had to return. Oh, so she returned. So I guess life didn't go too well for her. I had gone to love addicts before because I thought I was a love addict too. I thought even more so than drugs and drinking, women were my biggest problem. And so I used to think that for a little while. But again, a lot of it for me was fighting it. Fighting it becomes the problem. But when I owned it and I said, you know what? Sure, I like women. I'm not going to be dishonest with them. I'm not going to lead them on or cheat on them if I'm in a romantic relationship. But if I'm single, I'm going to be single. And so I decided to own it. Angela says, I don't hate my narcissistic family, but when you have a toxic family, you need to stay away from them to have a real and healthy home. Yes, I would agree. I would agree. Distance can go a far way. What did you learn there, George or Gabriel? I spent 12 years in SLAA. Because that's the hardest one, because people like food, more so even food, right? How do you go to someone who's bulimic or someone who's anorexic? You can't do the one is too many, 1,000 is never enough when it comes to food. You got to develop a healthy relationship with food. So what do? So I've always thought it's always pretty difficult for them. And just about as essential as food is relationships with people. Now, there are other relationships besides romantic relationships and sexual relationships, right? But let's face it, love is also a big thing too. Love and romantic relationships I would say it's a fairly important part of life. I don't have one now, but I can still see the importance of it. I can still see the impact of one. I'm not one of those people that hates on the people that are in a relationship because honestly, now that I'm happy being single, I kind of feel like being in a relationship, I would feel trapped because I'm so used to being single. Angela says, leaving toxic relationships is the only way. Absolutely. Gabriel says, honestly, a lot of my issue was that my mom regretted having me, and then I was looking for a mommy who wanted me. I am gay. I stopped watching porn 11 years ago. I've never heard of someone's life getting worse from not watching porn. How about that? I've never heard someone's life getting worse from reducing their drinking, if not stopping, less porn, more water, more working out. That's the hard four there. I've never seen someone get worse from doing those four things. George says drugs and sex go hand in hand. For sure they do, for sure. Gabriel, I'm not intimacy avoidant anymore. Yeah, the fear of intimacy is a big one. A lot of people would say narcissistic people have a fear of intimacy, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's exactly what it is. It probably is in some of them, but I don't think it is across the board. I don't like being single too much. Aha. So to the extent you don't like being single would be to the extent you have to be careful because that's the thing that not liking being single can be the thing that makes people look past red flags sometimes. So when they know something's not good, but they're like, oh, but I don't like being single. I don't want to be lonely. So I'll put up with this. I'm not saying you're going to do that, but that is something I hear. I agree, Angela. What do you agree on? Leaving toxic relationships is the only way? Of course, it's the only way. And some relationships only last because one person is willing to put up with disrespect. And don't confuse the length of a relationship for it being a healthier relationship. Someone can be with someone for 20 years, but that doesn't mean it's a good relationship. It just means they might have a comfortable dysfunction going on. And I've seen a fair amount of that as well. So, and the thing about the red flags in the beginning, if you catch yourself deering, and I went over this last night, but deering is defend, excuse, explain, rationalize. If you catch yourself doing that in regards to someone's behavior, that is not something to ignore. Angela says, I'm not afraid of relationships because you can be happy with an emotionally healthy partner. True. Emotional safety is key, Angela. Gabriel says, I prefer being in a relationship. I like the give and take and cuddling and monogamy, but I like being single, just not more than being in a relationship. Yeah, I mean, I think that's normal then. I think it would only become an issue when you hate being single and you're overlooking a lot of BS to not be single. That's the problem. That would be the problem. But as long as you're not doing that, then of course there's such a thing as interdependence and synergy when you can create more with someone than you could on your own. Synergistic. You go, Gabriel. I love being single and I enjoy being alone. I wonder if that's because I'm autistic. I think it could have something to do with it because I was someone that could spend hours and hours on my own, whether it's shooting hoops or just doing like things on my own. I had no problems with that because people in person, it can exhaust me. And that's one of the reasons why I did drugs and alcohol because I wanted to enjoy people. I just didn't. I just didn't unless I was drinking. I just didn't unless I was under the influence of something. But then I did. And sometimes I liked that. But it came at a cost. And sometimes the cost is hangovers. Sometimes the cost is worse with drugs, legal trouble. No bueno. I can spend tons of time on my own too. Certain people exhaust me. Some energize me. And that's a very important thing to pay attention to. Pay attention to the kinds of people that are good for your spirit, the kinds of people that you feel better about yourself from spending time around, and then the kinds of people that drain you, the kinds of people that give you the lingering upset effect, as they say. Those are ones to watch out for. And usually the ones that give you the lingering upset effect, it's because they're antagonistic, they're hostile, they're combative, or they're very controlling, or they're very particular, or they make mountains out of molehills. Those are the reasons that people feel emotionally unsafe to me. They're the reasons that ugh, they drain me, and I don't like spending time around them. And I actually have a quick trigger for people like that. If I see someone that's like that, you won't catch me spending too much time around them. How do you know you're not avoidant? I probably am a little bit avoidant, but I'm very aware of it. I'm very aware of it, and I would be. And here's also what I've noticed, Gabriel. I've noticed when you're with someone you're compatible with, a lot of the things when it comes to attachment that might have been a problem, they work themselves out with people that you're compatible with. But if you're not compatible with them, then those little bit of attachment issues or other issues, they really blow up. What is emotional safety for a guy? So for me, it would just be someone that you can be yourself with. Someone's not going to be like hyper controlling, hyper belittling, very particular, ripping you a new one for doing the smallest thing wrong. Those are the things that I don't like. People that make mountains out of molehills. To me, that's the opposite of emotional safety. Hashtag Blame says, there are people I call energy vampires that suck energy from you and are negative. Yes, that's a perfect word for it. There are certainly plenty of people like that. Gabriel says, combative people suck. Absolutely, they do. Jolly says, I'm happy when I'm alone. No stress. I'm not overwhelmed. That's how it is for me too. I could spend all day. I fully agree, Jared. Well said. For sure. Gotta watch out those drama queens and the killer queens. Got that agility, dynamite, and a razor beam. Guaranteed to blow your mind. Combative and disagreeable too. The disagreeable is a big one too. Ellie says, very well said, Jared, about emotional safety. Yes. That's been a big one for me recently because after I had that talk with Christian, it was about what is missing in these dysfunctional families. Well, emotional safety, which leads to disconnection. Those two things. That's it. And that's why it doesn't matter what your parents say sometimes. They can say all of the right words. They can do acts of love. But if you don't feel it because you don't feel emotionally safe with them, you're probably not going to feel loved by them. Disagreeable people are the worst. Yes, they're unpleasant. Although I do have a little bit of, I can have some debate bro in me too sometimes in certain topics, but I also know how to turn it off. There are some people I've seen that can never turn it off. They're disagreeable and there is no turning it off. But I can turn it off. I can turn it off and on. Actions over words is right, George. Have you ever heard of women who regret becoming mothers? Have you heard of women who regret? Sure. It actually happens more and more now. There are some people that say they wish they didn't. You used to not hear that. You used to hear people just say, yeah, they would never regret becoming a mother. But now sometimes people do. Sometimes people do. Because there's such a push now for, it's almost like a bad thing. People will think if a woman wants to be married and have kids, there's almost a little bit of shame attached to that now, where they really want to push women being single, the strong, independent woman. Have you heard about? There's a giant Reddit thread now. What subreddit, Gabriel? Meta Circle. Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean because this is what it is. Just like with the autism topic, the marriage and gender topic has become politicized. So now what you'll notice is when it comes to men, the women love the statistics that say married men do better in life. They have healthier this and healthier that. Although if you look at the studies they cited to come to that conclusion, They're very flawed studies, and they shouldn't even be saying them because they're that flawed. Also, I would say the men who are married, they're more likely to already have been healthy and financially successful also. So, which came first, marriage or their success? I'd say often their success came first. But notice women love citing that. And then they'll also love to cite women do better that are single. Single women are happier, but married men are happier. And women delightfully cite that. Why? Because any wounded feminine, especially wounded feminine, they hate anything that has to do with control. Anything that can be appear to be control, especially from men, they are hypersensitive to that. Human life has been devalued? Yes, sadly. Truth. Gabriel says many women feel becoming a mom was the worst mistake of their lives and they really dislike their kids. Well, that sounds like a recipe for disaster for their kids. My mom was like that with me, and many mothers have always been like that. Yeah, that's no good. I can't imagine if that's how they think and that's how they feel, that's probably being subcommunicated to their kids. And the kids getting the message, I'm worthless, I'm a burden. And then those are the people that are going to grow up to be people pleasers and think and have low self-worth. Because if that's what their mother thinks, good grief. Ellie says, Gabriel, not all women can love and be loved. They cannot properly attach or bond with their own children. Yes, this is true. Look at Livia Soprano from The Sopranos. Look at sometimes borderline mothers, schizophrenic mothers. In fact, now that I think of it, there are some women I know personally. They just don't have that motherly instinct. It's just missing. Whatever part of them that it should be, or should in quotations, it's just not there. Gabriel says, my mother despised being a mother. Yeah, it doesn't sound too good. Jolly, I love my children. They are my great accomplishments. And I think that's a much better attitude to have, I would say, right? Gabriel says, I got that message every day and I tried super hard to earn her love. Yeah, so it sounds like you jumped through her hoops to try to earn her love and affection. But what probably happened was the goalposts were always moving and you never quite got it, if I had to guess. Gabriel, so sorry you had to suffer that type of mother, for sure. You know, Gabriel, you would really enjoy, I think, there's a book from Christine Ann Lawson called Understanding the Borderline Mother. It's also an audiobook, but that's a fascinating book. And some people might listen to that and say, some of this sounds more narcissistic, which maybe it does. But I think it's also true of borderlines as well. Many women are bad mothers. We're not allowed to say it though. Yeah, I mean, because women, it's harder to criticize women in public. White men in particular are very easy to criticize. That's one of the reasons the CEO from the Coldplay scandal, Andy Byron, everyone was allowed to hate on him in large part because it was a white man. But notice with women, I get a lot more backlash. If I push back on women and call out a woman, there's a lot of people that just don't like it. So the most recent example of that was the Karen from the baseball game. The woman at the baseball game who took the ball. I ripped her, but way more people were mad at me for ripping her than they were for me calling out the cheating CEO. Calling out the cheating CEO? Sure. Calling out the woman who took the ball from a 12-year-old kid? You don't know what she's been through. She might have been traumatized. What if she ends her life because you bullied her by calling her out? And I would say, calling her out is not bullying her. That's not what bullying is. Bear says, you deserve better, Gabriel. You should say that strange biatch instead. She sounds like a demon. Yes, there are some people like that. They just don't have that. The part of them is missing. I've worked on this for 21 years. How old are you, Gabriel? She loved you, I'm sure. Well, maybe, George. Maybe, but maybe not. My mother was probably about 9 years old in emotional intelligence, Ellie says. That's got to leave a mark. That can't be good. If she was fighting you, she loved you. Maybe. She didn't, George. She does not. She does now because I don't need her. She hated dependence. I could see that. There's some women that are like that in particular. Like as long as you don't need them, they want you. But the second you need them, now they're repulsed and they're no farther. And this is one of the reasons why so many women fall for narcissistic guys too. Not the only reason, of course, but one of them. Because sometimes narcissistic guys, especially in the beginning, they're able to be non needy in the beginning. And women like that. I put it this way, being too needy is almost always more unattractive than not being needy. Ellie says radically accepting the truth is the way through this healing. Truth. Or there might be some EMDR or some other kinds of trauma therapies that could help too. But I'm all for whatever could help. I'm not married to one method. Whatever method would help. However, you have to see it to help yourself become the best version of yourself today. That's how I would suggest someone sees it. 41? Yeah, so a year older than me. I'm 40. Yes, all children are needy, as they're supposed to be. And I would say also, like, who did you have to be for your mother to love you? That's a big one that Tony Robbins always asks. And I think the answer to that could be telling as well. I think my mother loved us, but it felt like she wasn't allowed to love us, but from afar with our stepfather. Was she on the spectrum? I like some Tony Robbins sometimes. I like some capitalist porn. I liked his book, Master the Money Game. I think there's other couple things. Now, granted, he can certainly be an ass, and he can certainly do some toxic positivity stuff as well. But I also think he's got some good things to teach as well. Yes, Jolly. While in denial, I believed I was loved when in fact I was discarded and despised. Well, that's not very good. Well, because your mother was emotionally 9 years old. We think she is an ASD. So I could see why you think that, Gabriel, but I don't think that in every aspect. There are certainly some things that are full of shit, but I also think there are other things that can be very helpful. It just depends. Don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as they'll say. I think mindset stuff is key. Like attitude determines altitude. Now, some people would say that's obnoxious to hear too, but I think there's a little bit of truth in it. Like when I'm doing my best and I have a good attitude, things are more likely to go well. And that can be annoying for some people to hear, but I also think it's true. Even a broken clock tells the right time twice a day. So I think he's probably more right than twice a day, but not completely right. So I think my opinion of Tony Robbins is a little higher, or probably much higher than yours. But I think the capitalist porn people, they can be good, but they also certainly deserve to be called out as well, depending on the topic. That's what I would say. And my Mount Rushmore of capitalist porn, you got Alex Hormozy, Tony Robbins, Tim Ferriss, and I'm trying to think who the fourth person should be on my capitalist porn Mount Rushmore. Attitude determines altitude. You never heard that, George? That's a Tony Robbins ism. I can't put Andrew Tate on the four, can I? No, I get myself too much hate for that. But who else? Tim Ferriss, Tony Robbins, Alex Hormozy, and you know what? The dude from the graveyard. The hell's his name? The guy who says the graveyard is the richest place on earth. Jordan Peterson would be a good candidate, actually. If I wanted to be diverse, I would say. Who else would be up there, though? You know, Peter Thiel. I think Peter Thiel's a gay man, isn't he, Gabriel? Isn't he a billionaire as well? He might be warranted of the capitalist porn Mount Rushmore. Ellie Hugs, that's just effed up. Yeah. I've spoken to Jordan Peterson before, Phil. He's an interesting fellow. I think Peter Thiel is gay, Gabriel. But I was also going to put that black guy, the guy from the graveyard, he's the black guy. If I want to make my Mount Rushmore a little bit diverse. The graveyard. What's his name? Les Brown. So you all have a homework assignment. Look up on YouTube, Les Brown, the graveyard. And he's got a great voice for this too. But he said the graveyard is the richest place on earth because the graveyard is where all of the unwritten books, the unstarted businesses, the inventions that were never made, that's where they are. They are in the graveyard because they never came to be. So you don't want to leave your gifts in you to let them die in the graveyard. You want to give your gifts away while you're here. And they would say, what do you have to offer that the world needs? And then go from there. And usually what I would say to people is your interests and the things that you normally really enjoy, or the things that when you talk about them, your eyes sparkle, they are signposts. They are signposts pointing you in the direction that you're supposed to be going in. And I don't know if you've noticed, but this is what I try to do in my life. So when I have these little wands and I call myself the wizard of radical self-respect, the shepherd of black sheep, the warden of the downtrodden flock, those are me leaning into my interests. It's leaning into who I am and what I find interesting and what makes me passionate to talk about. And sometimes that's why politics comes up too. Don't usually like super famous people. And don't get me wrong, Gabriel. Some of them can certainly be obnoxious. Put Roseanne on your Mount Rushmore? Roseanne? Jolly truly was cognitive dissonance to the max. Roseanne is an informed truth teller. I would like to have a conversation with Roseanne. It's her loss. That's tragic. I can tell. Good. I'm glad it all shines through here. But the more you own it and the more you lean in, the better things go. And they also say, when you're a little bit uncomfortable, when your ambitions make you nervous, that's also when you're on the right track. But don't get it twisted too. I don't think not everyone's meant for certain things. Like, I think everyone has their own path. What's correct for me might not be correct for everyone, and vice versa. And there's pros and cons to both. I think, honestly, some of the healthiest people out there are just, probably like middle income people that have a healthy family. They're well adjusted. They have friends. They have hobbies. They don't have any like crippling addictions. And they're just living. And they're not probably talking on social media like I am. They're not influencers or anything. Those people to me are probably some of the healthiest people sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. I could definitely see that. But as always, everything depends. It just depends. So, like, I'm someone that I think I've been through a lot. So I have a lot of things to share about. And I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of experience in many different topics, whether it's SLAA, addiction, autism, neurodivergence, social anxiety, the 12 steps, narcissistic relationships, narcissistic family members, what it's like to have undiagnosed autism, being bullied, all of this. I have firsthand knowledge in all of this. Bear says, wait, who said the graveyard? Follow your bliss. I just had him up and I already forget his name. Les Brown. Look up Les Brown in the graveyard. You'll like him. Gabriel says, I'm pretty successful too. Have written books, have a YouTube channel, teaching practice for 20 years. Respected. Well, it's good. As long as you think it's good. That's what I would say. What's your channel, Gabriel? What's the name of the book that you wrote? And I think everyone should watch the Les Brown thing. I think everyone would like that. What's the name of one of your books? Oh, How to Sing Without Thinking. Oh, that sounds like an interesting book. Where can you find these books? On Amazon? Oh, there it is. Interesting. An enlightened lunatic. Yes, Gabriel is precious. Cool. There you go. Hopefully, we can get some action over there. I think next week, also, announcements for the channel here. The game exposed, we pushed that back 1 week. It was going to be next week, but now it's going to be the week following. Next Friday is Chantal Contarines. Marcella from Beyond the Bruise, I'm going to invite her on for early next week, and she'll join me on a live like this probably. And then, let's see here. I'll have to check, Gabriel. I'm not sure. Let's see here. So Marcella will be then, Chantal next Friday, the game exposed the week after that. I'm going to be on Mark Vicente's show, if anyone knows him. That's going to be the 16th or 17th, George. I think you'll like that. I don't know that much about her, though I'm following her on Instagram now, so we'll see. I'll come up with some good things. I'll come up with some good things to ask her. And, it'll be an interesting interview. I can barely talk, let alone sing. Well, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're probably right. Who said that? Henry Ford. And that's part of why attitude determines altitude. Ellie, don't be talking badly about yourself. Well, I can say not everyone sings well, but anyone can sing. How about that? That's fair. That's fair. You could sing, but it's not always good. That's what I would say. Got so traumatized, it affected my speaking ability. My one good friend used to say, I'm such a bad singer, I offend myself. Got so traumatized, it affected my speaking ability. Attitude didn't determine altitude for slaves. Yeah, and that's just taking it to the extremes, though. Like, for sure, them. But then again, if you were a slave that was hell-bent on escaping, maybe they did. It's possible. Put it this way, attitude doesn't hurt, but it's not everything, right? There's going to be a balance. It won't be black and white. Or Thomas Jefferson said, not anything will ever help the man with the wrong mental attitude. And I think that's correct. And then I was very abused. Well, I'm very sorry. I figured that, Ellie. And sure, that happens. But again, even with systemic injustice, I think people got to have the attitude to even fight it. Because if you don't have the attitude to even speak up, like the mindset to do that, you're not even going to be able to fight that. So there's many, like, And that's what the left needs. I think the left needs some more capitalist porn because it's what they're missing. Now, the right is missing different things. The right would be missing probably more empathy and compassion a lot of times, but they're both missing things, and that's the problem. So, by your parents, though, right, Ellie? That's what I would say to that. I was hitting my head 60 times a few years ago. Well, that's not very good. Do you have a TBI, a traumatic brain injury? Yep, and sometimes they can be tone deaf, but there's also practical applications of them too, is what I would say. Got to know the situation. Wisdom's knowing when. Was that a romantic partner who did that to you, Ellie? And hopefully your neighbors aren't giving you too much trouble either, huh? Yeah, no bueno. Definitely no bueno. Yeah, I figured. Where is he now? Where is your brother now, Ellie? I mean, hopefully he's in jail, honestly. That's where he deserves to be. Yeah, no good, Jolly. No good at all. Same house currently? That doesn't sound very good either. But I guess they didn't do anything. What happened? Did someone else defend him because he had some sort of mental health issue or something? I've seen that happen before too. Unfortunately. Yeah. Ideally, that's the best way to handle that, to get as far away from him as possible because he doesn't sound very safe. That's for sure. You don't need to be spending too much time around people who aren't safe. But I know sometimes people get trapped. They get trapped because of finances and other things. So things get difficult. It's not always as easy as people would like it to be. That's it. There's no assault charges. You probably reported him after the fact and he got away with it. Unfortunately, when it comes to a lot of these crimes, they're more difficult to prosecute than people would think. And sometimes it's, I mean, I get why sometimes, but it would also be good if justice could be served, is what I would say. Because if justice isn't served, then, those people can continue to harm others. And he never had to actually go to court for it, or they gave him like probation because it was a first offense or something. But that was a violent crime. That's the problem. They'll only arrest someone if you can call them immediately. Sometimes. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not sure when it comes to that. Jolly says, I had social workers and people who helped me. Good. Yes, that's the best way to go. Says, is justice sensitive in autism or is it an ADHD thing? It can be anyone, really, is what I would say. Anyone could. Some people say it's more a thing with autism or ADHD, but I think it can be anyone. It just depends. All right. But while you're all here, make sure you like the video while you're here. And I'm about to pull the old Cinderella routine because it's about to be the old midnight. About the time to close this down. But keep your eyes open for Marcella from Beyond the Bruise next week. Chantel Contarines, especially for those people that have to co-parent with a narcissistic parent. And I'll probably come up with some other things to go over. You got it, Gabriel. Thanks for joining us here. And Ellie and George and Jolly and Bear and Angela. Where did Angela go, by the way? Kat! Where have you been, Kat? I saw you commented on other things here. Of course, Ellie, you can share about anything here. Yes, have a good night, Gabriel. No, Phil Bradley is neither late nor early. He is like Gandalf the wizard, only on time. So, Kat, you might have to watch the replay of this because we went over some good stuff if you're interested in the autism topic, at least. They went over a couple other things too. But yes, sleep well to everybody there. It's always been a pleasure. And you might catch me live again tomorrow night. I'm at work, so I can't comment as much as I would like. Well, if you're off tomorrow night or Monday night, we'll be here. Because you don't have to go home. But you can stay here because you can watch the replay and then comment on the replay. That's how you go. And I'm glad you found the channel too. Tell a friend or 50. Anyone that you think could be helped by what the wizard has to offer. Tell them he's the shepherd of black sheep, the wizard of radical self-respect, and the warden of the downtrodden flock. How about that? All right, everybody. Thanks all for joining. #blame. Nice to see you here for the first time. Kat, sorry you missed some of this, but I'm sure you'll be here again for some of the others. You got it, Kat. Have a good one. And thank you for sharing #blame. I love it. Yeah, Sunday or Monday, definitely. Cinderella, or as the gays would say, Cinderfelly.